Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present Chayim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and one of the things that is sometimes missed about the Jewish tradition is the extent to which it's all about people and how one's ultimate responsibility is to add to the human loveliness of this world. It begins with caring about one's own family and one's own people, one's own nation. But the Jewish tradition is absolutely clear. It never ends there. We all have a responsibility to do whatever we can to break the bonds of slavery in whatever ugly form slavery takes: physical, financial, emotional, sexual, any form of behavior that diminishes the quality of life of another human being and prevents them from becoming all they can become and from experiencing the breadth of joy life has to offer. Any form of human behavior that trivializes the worth and dignity of other human souls is slavery. And the Jewish tradition demands that good, ethical, righteous human beings fight slavery wherever it exists. And you know, when Jews speak of never again, that phrase is not meant to refer to Jewish suffering alone, or to the Jewish resolve that there'll never be another Shoah to consume the Jewish people. It means that never again shall be referring to any configuration that engulfs women and men and children, whomever they are, wherever they live. And so when the Jewish tradition teaches in the Talmud the line that has become so well known, one who saves a single life is counted as if one has saved all humanity. That Talmudic principle is the articulation of a Jewish value, an ideal vision of life that is to be realized as much as is humanly possible. Now, for many people, for many Jews, this Jewish value plays a rather minor role in their thinking and in their daily lives. And for many, the challenges of their own life situations are already difficult enough to navigate. But then, there are some rare and unusual individuals who, in part because of circumstance and more, from having incredible souls of their own, do find ways to live this Jewish teaching. And this is a setup for me to introduce my guest on this edition of L'Chaim here on Shalom TV, and I don't want to embarrass her. But the reality is, my guest on this edition of L'Chaim has done some extraordinary work, what the Jewish tradition calls Gmilut Chasadim, acts of love and kindness, on behalf of young people who, through no fault of their own, have been ferociously victimized by a form of genocide that has robbed them of parents and of a future. It is my honor and pleasure to introduce you to Anne Heyman, founder of ASYV, the Agahozo-Shalom Youth Village in Rwanda, a community that cares for and literally saves the lives of children orphaned in the genocidal war of 1994. And Anne, I wanted to meet you for a long time. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure to be here, and thank you for having me.
So the obvious question, just to begin, who are you, and how did you get to be you, that you would become so involved in what is really a world away, trying to help young children, and their older children as well, who have been orphaned because of the genocide, the madness of Rwanda. But where did you grow up?
I actually grew up in South Africa. And at age 15, my parents immigrated to the States.
That means for the first 15 years of your life?
I lived in South Africa.
Okay. Do you remember it well?
Yeah, I remember it pretty well.
Was your family part of the Jewish community?
My family was part of the Jewish community. You know, I went to public school, but like all good Jewish kids, and Jewish life at the time in South Africa. Anyway, I grew up in Cape Town, but we went to synagogue every Friday night and Saturday morning.
It was just routine, wasn't it?
It was part of what you did.
Right.
as was for me belonging to Habonim. That was
Yes.
also. So I grew up in Habonim. I grew up Zionist.
Yes.
I always wanted to go and live in Israel.
Really?
And when my parents moved to the States, I was 15. I decided that I was going to, and the school year doesn't quite correspond to the American school year. So there was sort of this overlap, and I felt like I'd sort of been there, done that. So I decided I would graduate school early and go make Aliyah. When I came to the States, we moved to Brookline, Massachusetts. And of course, the first thing I did was look for Habonim to join,
Yes.
which there wasn't, but
Right.
there was something called Young Judea. So I joined Young Judea.
Which also was fabulous.
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 Became very active, and it's been very fabulous because I went on Young Judea's year course to Israel, where I met at that time, young man, but who's now my husband.
Oh, lovely.
And we now have 3 children, the youngest of whom is about to go in year course. The 2 older ones have all been. So it's
Mazal tov.
become
That's
very
wonderful.
much part of our family tradition.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to Israel at age 17, thought I was making Aliyah. After a week on kibbutz, met my husband, who comes from New York. And the short version of the story is that's why I live in New York. Although we do have a home in Israel. We spent some time, back and forth and spent every summer in Israel. My kids are fluent Hebrew speakers.
How did that happen?
Like I said, I always wanted to live in Israel. He always wanted to start a business and felt it would be better to do it here.
Yes.
But he feels very close to Israel.
And forgive me, is he roughly your age?
Yes, he's my age.
His name is?
Seth Marin.
So Seth, and you meet Seth in Israel.
Met Seth in Israel.
Okay, and he's roughly your age. And if he had wanted to build a business in Israel, might the 2 of you stayed?
Yes, absolutely.
He loved it also.
He loved Israel.
It just was less practical for him.
He still loves Israel. And he, grew up in America and loves America and was very happy to live in America. With close ties to Israel. He grew up in Young Judea also.
Okay.
Had a leadership role, very engaged, and does all his, Jewish
That's
philanthropic
marvelous.
stuff too.
Yes.
I think we have a wonderful compromise.
This sounds silly, but I want to say it anyway. Some of the nicest people and most committed Jews come through Young Judea. And that's not to say anything about other camp sisters.
I will tell you.
But do you agree with me?
It's not just nice people and committed Jews. It's the people who are out there doing life-changing work in the world, because I come across them in various spheres. It's not, I do the youth village, and that's my 24/7 job, but I am engaged in other things. And I will tell you that whether it's working with the Ethiopian community, whether it's I'm doing a solar energy project now actually in Rwanda, which I'll tell you about, but it's with the Young Judean. It's everywhere. I did a program in Uganda for a while with the Young Judean. Everywhere you go and you turn, it's amazing how much schools in New York just really changing the world.
I happen to think you're right. And again, it's not to say anything negative about other camp systems and other Jewish camp programs. And Ramaz puts out lovely kids. They all do. But there's something I have found
there is a commitment to social action.
And that's the word I was looking for, commitment. So you were lucky in some way that, and Habonim is also wonderful as well. But you were lucky to fall into that. And lo and behold, you meet your husband that way, and it's in some way shaped the rest of your life.
Absolutely.
Okay, so you do come back. You don't stay in Israel. You come back with him.
I came back. We both went to college. After college, we went to Israel. Came back. I went to law school. He started a business.
When did you get married?
We got married in 1986.
Okay.
And but went back and forth to Israel all the time. And when we had kids, we decided that since we both spoke fluent Hebrew, it was a gift that we could give our children. Mm-hmm. And so we did.
How? How did you do it?
How did we do it?
Yes, because a lot of kids go to Talmud Torah, go to day school. They do not end up speaking fluent Hebrew.
So we had the advantage of they went to day school too. But in the beginning, before there was a day school, I hired an Israeli babysitter.
Aha.
Not a live-in, but somebody who came and left. But my husband and I both spoke fluent Hebrew, so we only spoke Hebrew in the house.
Isn't that the way it has to be?
See, I think it makes it easier for the kids. Then they learn it naturally.
Yes, what they did is they heard it in their day-to-day living.
Absolutely.
And where are they in life now? How old are they? Where
I have a senior at the University of Pennsylvania.
Mazel tov.
He's about to graduate. I have a daughter who's a sophomore at Brown,
Uh-huh.
and I have a son who is graduating high school. He has been accepted at Carnegie Mellon,
Wow.
computer science. We're
All
very
three are
proud of him.
very proud.
Yeah,
Wow.
but the younger one is, of course, going on a year course before he goes off to college, so he'll defer for a year.
That is lovely. You've done very well, Mazal Tov.
Thank
Okay.
you.
And as you continue your life with Seth here in America, are you involved in Jewish life?
We have always been involved in Jewish life. Growing up in young Judea, being socially conscious and committed, of course, and we always made a commitment in terms of our financial giving and in terms of our personal giving. So when we got married, I was first working for a law firm, and then I went to the DA's office, and I worked until my third child was born.
I saw you worked in the Manhattan
DA's office.
Oh, just take it for a moment. What was that like?
It was fabulous.
It
was great.
You didn't say it was horrible.
No, it was fantastic. I worked when Robin Morgenthau was the DA.
Yes.
It was an honor and a privilege to work for Mr. Morgenthau, and I loved every minute that I was in the office.
And what was your work
great.
primarily?
I actually did mostly I spent time in rackets, organized crime. I was in the investigations bureaus.
You were, okay.
So white-collar crime rackets.
And the truth is, he and your department did some real good at the time.
I believe so. I hope so.
Yeah, okay. All right, so it was a detour, not a detour, but it was a part of the pathway. But
Right,
you did
so
not stay at the DA's office.
I didn't stay at the DA's office. You grow up thinking that you can have it all,
Yes.
and what you find out when you are a young mother is that you really can't. You do have to make choices, and I don't for a minute regret the choice that I made, but that was the choice and I waited till I had 3 kids, but by 3 kids you can't really be on trial and have a newborn, a 2-year-old, and a 4-year-old at home. So I wound up staying home with the kids, but Seth and I were always, even when we were both working, engaged in philanthropy. We cared about, it's really important for people who are considering doing philanthropic work to sort of have a personal philosophy about what you want to achieve. And so it was always important to us to care for, we both owed a lot to youth movements. And so it was important for us to support our youth movements and to be involved in it. For us, it manifested itself in Jewish camping, and we actually became very involved in the JCCA. We developed a teen center, which involves a lot of things, but really focusing on youth and focusing on elderly. I was president of Dorot. I don't know if you know Dorot.
I do know Dorot.
An organization, for those who don't know, that deals with homeless and elderly homebound in Manhattan.
And it's critical.
Critical.
We're not here to talk about Dorot, but
also a fantastic organization.
Yes, it is something that deserves much more attention, and people should be more aware of it. And
it's a tremendous resource for those people who are my age and beginning to struggle with having elderly parents and what to do.
Yes.
It's a tremendous resource.
And the Jewish tradition has this ethic of kibud aim, kibud av. We are to honor our mother and father, and that means we are to care for them. And it gets harder and harder in this world, and sometimes there are older people, and there's no one to care for them. Right. And Dorot does a fabulous job.
Does a fantastic job. They have this friendly visiting program.
Yes.
And as you were saying that, I was thinking, when my kids were little, that's one of the things that we did. We had elderly people that we visited, and regularly, and as a part of a package delivery program that they have. And I always used to tell people that that's my insurance. That
Good for you.
My kids now know what's expected when I get to be that age.
Dorot is doing extraordinary work, and I'm glad you mentioned it. And your point was you have a philosophy of life, right? And what you're trying to do here is use whatever your talents are, whatever your resources are, in a constructive way, and you have, I assumed, modeled that for your children as well.
I hope so.
Okay.
I certainly hope so. So, our personal philosophy, we consider that you have to take care of the Jewish world because that's part of our obligation. So the stuff that I'm talking about, whether it's the Jewish Day School, Dorot, the JCCA, Young Judea, that all falls into that category. We pay, our dues to UJA. That is part of being part of the Jewish community. But more than that, if you're fortunate enough to be able to think about more than that, it's really what is your guiding principle? And for us, it's about creating a positive Jewish image. And that means different things in different contexts. Within the Jewish community, there is a lot of education to be done. And for me, it really focuses on the way in which you give. So you talked a little bit a little bit at the beginning of the segment about tikkun olam and what it means, and it's not just the Jewish world. You know, what I tell people is tikkun olam, the act, the commandment, the mitzvah, is the act, and it has nothing to do with the recipient. That's really what the focus is.
That's very beautiful.
So, you know, for us, it's when you're giving as a Jew, you can be building a hospital, a library, a public school, a park. It doesn't matter, and it doesn't matter who the recipients are. It is really important that you communicate the Jewish values that have caused you to be doing whatever it is you're doing. Mm-hmm. So again, like I said, I don't want to go into all the stuff that we do, but with some Jewish organizations, it is important, you know, if I'm going to give to a Jewish organization that is a social service agency, I want them, the recipients, who are essentially kids on welfare, but they need to understand that it is a Jewish social service agency that is giving them whatever assistance and why. And not that they should be grateful, but that there is an understanding that there is a Jewish value that has compelled somebody to give them something, and that to me is, you know, we talk about hasbara and explaining who the Jewish people are. Don't waste your money and don't waste your time. Do the right thing and do it in a way that lets people know who you are, and that's all you got to do.
I have never heard it said as well. I want to press you on one part of it. And when I say press, it's not because I disagree. I want you to explain it more. There are two problems with tzedakah in the Jewish world. One, there's not enough of it. Then there's the issue of, for people who are engaged in tzedakah, and again, tzedakah comes in many forms. For some people, it is money, and for some people, they don't have the money, and it's what they do. And then some people have both and do both. But the question is always raised of the Jew. Where is your priority in tzedakah? And there are many Jews now who are not involved in Jewish giving at all, and their concern is a universalist concern, and they feel that if they're involved, whether it's with a checkbook or whether it's with time and effort, they want to give it to the broad general world, and they're not interested in UJA, and they're not interested in Federation, they're not interested in Jewish, in the Heschel Day School, whatever it is. They're not interested in young Jews, whatever it. And the question always is asked, and it's what I tried to say in the open. The Jew does begin with a concern about taking care of the Jewish people, family. It just doesn't end there. But I do want to hear you speak about this balance that you try to live in your own life. And what is your advice for people in general, Jews, about, you know, the counter argument is the Jews are a small people. If Jews don't take care of Jews, nobody's going to take care of Jews. And so that becomes our primary concern. And then in addition, it can never end there.
So I'm going to, there are a lot of answers to what you mentioned there. But I will tell you this, that if you give in a Jewish way, again, it's the act, it's not the recipient, but if you give in a Jewish way, then, you know, the question that the Jews are always saying, is it good for the Jews? It's good for the Jews. It's good for the Jews in so many ways. You know, and so I would be less concerned about, are you giving to a synagogue, a temple, a day school, a Jewish program, than are you giving in a Jewish way? Because I think if you're giving in a Jewish way, whether it's to, you name it, but you are able to articulate the Jewish values that have you acting in that way, then I think you are doing a service for the Jewish people. I don't know if that answers your question.
It does answer my question, and it's not about disagreeing with you or agreeing with you. It is a matter of balance, and my feeling is that you say this out of such an extraordinary Jewish context that for you and your husband, whatever giving you do, it's clear to me, all of it is done with a Jewish neshama, that it comes out of a Jewish sense of wanting to do mitzvah. I'm not partial to the phrase tikkun olam, but I use the phrase gemilut chasadim, but it's the same idea. Our job is to improve the world and improve the lives of other people. The only thing that concerns me is that if there are people who do not come from your context, your background, they will hear you say, it's as valid to give Jewishly to all the activities that have, to Red Cross, to United Way, to cancer research, all of which, to a university, to a hospital, but they won't give to a synagogue. And as a result, the synagogue won't have enough funds to serve the Jewish community.
So let me tell you what happens in the real world when you have unengaged Jews who say, I'm not interested in giving to anything particularly Jewish. It's not even that they're not interested, it's that they don't have the context. They care about orphans in Africa. They will, and if you have a conversation with them that revolves around the Jewish values for why you're supporting orphans in Africa, and we see this with our volunteers. We have so many young college students who come to the village in Rwanda who are Jewish in name. We have relationships with a couple of Hillels where we do Hillel interfaith trips. So it's a Hillel-led trip, but it's interfaith. And the kids who come on the trips, some of them are Jewishly connected, many of them are not. When you sit in a room and you know, first of all, you go to a place where you see how 96% of the world lives, and it's nothing like the way you live.
Nothing.
When you talk to kids who have come from a place where they're worrying about where their next meal is coming from, forget the genocide discussions that happen. And for Jewish kids, together with non-Jewish kids, not in the context of the Shoah, which was for our children long ago and far away. It was like the coming out of Egypt. It was something that happened to our families a long time ago. And yes, it's part of our history and we need to learn about it, but it isn't what governs their lives as it was for my generation and the generation before me. For our kids to be placed in that environment, have those discussions, they begin to think, what is my obligation to these people? Do I have one? What does my tradition tell me? And you know what? They begin to look at their tradition. So they're engaged in doing secular, if you will, work, but they're beginning to think about. And we have so many kids that come back from that program and begin a Jewish exploration.
That's wonderful.
It is. And when people say, whether it's federations around the country or how do we reach out to that unengaged community, you do it by engaging them in what they care about, but then have discussions about why they care about it. And it will lead to connecting them Jewishly, which will result in them taking care of their Jewish family.
Again, beautifully said. I endorse every single thing you say. Thank you. In one moment, I now want to talk about Africa with you, and that's where we'll pick this up. On L'chaim, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Ann Heyman, who is the founder of Agahozo-Shalom Youth Village in Rwanda. We're going to talk about the Youth Village in just a moment. Please stay with us.
These kids experienced the abuse in the society. They have wounds in their heart. So those wounds must be heard. The Rwanda educational system has met many challenges, especially as a country that faces the problem of genocide. It will not be good to prepare a kid to give him national certificate without preparing him to survive in the future. There is a great difference between the educational system here in Agahozo and in the country in general.
Here, our teachers, they take care about our learners. They have to understand the difficulties learners have in their learning process so that they can help accordingly.
When they come for the first year, they are helped to heal their heart, to repair the wounds that they have in their heart. On an academic level, they are helped to be integrated in the educational system. They are given a certain foundation in order to continue their studies.
Basically, even when we're discussing, even when we're teaching, we don't normally focus on the content or the material. We need also to provide values that are needed outside of this village. Tamashak normally is a pedagogical trainer or pedagogical advisor. Normally she works hand in hand with me. We are planning together how we can help teachers.
We started to work about how to change the strategies of teaching. Not to stand and to speak. The star of the lesson should be the children.
The major objective of my lesson is to promote the critical thinking. Critical thinking, knowing and understanding the problems around us and being able to overcome those problems.
Our learners, are now more creative than before, which is needed in this world.
On L'chaim, I have the great pleasure of speaking with Ann Heyman, founder of the Agahozo-Shalom Youth Village in Rwanda, and that's where I want to start this segment. What I know about your work is just extraordinary, and it touched me profoundly, and I said I really hoped you would come in and speak to me about it. But there had to be a genesis to it. How, Ann, do you get involved in Rwanda?
The way I got involved in Rwanda, and it's interesting because I grew up in South Africa, and people always think there's an African connection. I felt something, but had nothing to do with it. We talked a little bit about personal philosophies and creating a positive Jewish image. So one of the things that we do is we have a program on a number of campuses called Moral Voices. And the idea behind that is we work with the Hillel on campus for the Hillel to take a leadership role in a conversation on campus, and every year the Moral Voices Committee picks a conversation, but it's for the entire campus. And then there's a year's worth of activities surrounding that topic. And there's always a kickoff lecture, and then all kinds of film festivals, essays, whatever it is. So we did, in the fall of 2005, our inaugural program was at Tufts University, and we did Moral Voices on Genocide. But because of the nature of the program, we didn't want to invite Elie Wiesel. We wanted to invite somebody that would really generate action and excitement through the whole campus about a discussion about genocide. And so we invited someone to talk about the Rwandan genocide. And in the dinner before the big speech, which all the campus's leadership is invited to the Hillel, I think my husband was making conversation and said, "What's the biggest problem facing Rwanda today?" And the response was, in a country where you have 1.2 million orphans, and this is in November of 2005, with no systemic solution to the orphan problem, there is no future for the country. So I will tell you that today Rwanda has a population of almost 12 million people, which is an issue in and of itself for sub-Saharan Africa, but an orphan population of 2.85 million children, orphans and vulnerable children, so they're now counted together. And it's true, if you don't have a systemic solution to the orphan problem, and there are almost 100 million orphans in Africa.
It sounds staggering.
It is staggering. Rwanda alone, but then you look at all the countries surrounding it. Kenya's got 6 million, this one's got 7 million, we're talking orphans.
No parents.
So the international definition of orphan, just to be clear and fair and honest, is the UN definition includes orphans of one parent. So if you have a mom, generally, if you're an African child and you only have a mom to take care of you, you are living in a vulnerable circumstance. So they count orphans as orphans of one parent. But in any case, no systemic solution. And literally at the dinner table, it pops into my head this ridiculous idea. And at this point, I'm not involved in youth villages at all. But I say, but there is a systemic solution. Israel at one point had thousands of orphans, and they don't have an orphan problem today. You should build youth villages. And, everyone around the table sort of says, great idea, could you pass the salt? And that's the end of the conversation. But it was something that I couldn't let go of. And I just, I went home and I started to do research on youth villages. And somebody said to me, do you know Chaim Perry? And I said, who's that? He said, oh, he runs the best youth village in Israel. And so I wrote him a note, dear Dr. Perry, you don't know me, but my name's Ann Heyman, and I have this idea, and what do you think? And he said, when can you meet? And we wound up having coffee in New York, and he invited me to come to Israel, to Yamin Ord. He said, the next time you're in Israel, come, and I'll invite some people, you can make a presentation, and we'll see. So in the spring of...
He somehow gravitated to your idea.
He thought it was a brilliant idea. And I will tell you that at that time, Yamin Ord he was then the head of Yamin Ord. He's now leading something called Yamin Ord Initiatives. He had begun, I think, the thought process about replicating Yamin Ord, and I was able to give him the push, not intentionally, but I think through the work that he did with me, he went on to form Yemin Ord Initiatives, and they now are running a fabulous organization, really regenerating the youth village movement in Israel and the assisting movement, the youth villages that exist. So in any event, I met with Dr. Perry, and he said in the spring of 2000, it was Pesach 2006, my daughter was then 13 on her Israel trip with her school. And I was staying at a hotel with her. She had come in to stay with me for the night, and I was going up the next morning to meet Dr. Perry. My team at that point consisted of me, my friend Tina, who had said, what are you doing? I want to come to this youth village thing with you. And I said, what are youth village? You want to come to Israel with me? Come to Israel with me. And I have a very good friend in Israel, from a young Judean, Gidon Hersher, and he said, he works for JDC Israel, and he said, I'll come with you too. And so we were going up to Yemin Ord for me to make this presentation. And the night before, I'm in my hotel room, and I say to my daughter, I'm going up to make this big presentation, and I don't even know, my mind was like, 20 years down the road already, where we had Shalom villages all over Africa. And so I wanted, in each country, I wanted the something Shalom village. And so I wanted a Kenya Rwanda word, which is the language they speak in Rwanda, that would go with Shalom. But I didn't know any Rwandans. That's how insane my story is. I did not know any Rwandans. So my daughter flips open her computer and says, give me a minute. And within 5 minutes, she says, so you have a number of options. This is the one I like the best, Agahozo. Agahozo means a place where tears are dried.
Oh.
So the next morning, we packed up and went up to Yemin Ord, and Chayim had assembled about 25 people, mostly from the Ethiopian Israeli community, because they are a large percentage of the youth village community at this point in Israel. And also because we were talking about Africa. And the conversation literally started with, where is Rwanda and why should we care? And because I had spent the last 6 months reading everything that there was to read about Rwanda, genocide. At the time I had an 11-year-old boy, and at one point he came to me and he said, Ima, your life must be so depressing. And I said to him, why would you say that? And he said, look at the stuff. And he took me into my bedroom, where there was a book called America in the Age of Genocide next to my bed. And there's the quintessential book on the Rwanda genocide is a book called Please, Sir, we wish to inform you that tomorrow we will be killed with our families. And so I have all these books lying around my room, and he says, Ima, your life must be so depressing. And I say, why would you say that? And he says, look at what you're reading. And I said to him, Jonathan, it's not since I started doing this work that I really have faith in mankind, because every day I get up and I get to talk to people who are trying to do good things in the world.
That's wonderful. Not until you got involved.
Not until I got involved.
Okay. So what happens at the meeting?
So at the meeting, as I said, it starts off with, where's Rwanda, why should we care? I'm able to give them lots of good reasons about where it is and why we should really care.
Why should they care?
They should care because we are a people who, there are a lot of reasons that you should care. But for me, I think the core of what it cuts to is that we experienced a genocide. We, because we are people of the book and we study things to death, have spent the last 60 years studying genocide, the causes of genocide, the consequences of genocide, how you deal with genocide. And what are we doing with that knowledge? What's the point? Well, the point is so that it doesn't happen again, so that when it does, you can help people, you can share the solutions that you found. So for me, that was the reason. We talk about Or LeGoyim and what
light to the nations.
Light unto the nations, and what Israel is supposed to be. This is what Israel is supposed to be. Israel is supposed to be an incubator for solutions to world problems, but not just for us. Then we have to take it to the world. You haven't filled that mission if you're not sharing.
Was the meeting successful?
We got up from the meeting with everybody saying, well, when can we go? And again, the irony of all ironies, I hadn't been to Rwanda. I didn't know if this was a model that would work in Rwanda. We had never had any conversations with any Rwandans. But I'm a believer in what I call the step-by-step method of project development. And so I turned to Tina and I literally said, we have 3 weeks. We got to get on the ground in Rwanda, and this is how we're going to do it. We're going to just email everybody we know, say, do you know a Rwandan? Get phone numbers. And we wound up calling people in everywhere from Australia to Canada to Belgium to you name it, and compiling a list of people who would talk to us when we went to Rwanda. And that was sort of the next step. But I just want to say one thing about that meeting. when we got up from the table, one of the Vatikim, one of the elders from the Ethiopian community, everybody got up after the meeting, and he asked everybody to sit down, and he had something to say. And what he said to them was, Chevre, friends, I just want you to take note of the fact that this is the first time that we are sitting around talking about the problems of another community and not our own. And so that is yet another level of the advantage to your community for doing for others. It is healing. We talk about our village philosophy is really based on two concepts: tikkun halev, repairing the heart. These kids come from places where they are abandoned in every sense of the word, and all of them have emotional issues that they have to deal with. So our first priority is healing them so that they can live, have hope, think about the future. And then tikkun olam. And what we've learned, and this is sort of the beauty of the youth village system, because that's where it comes from, by doing for others, you heal yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's really our community, as a community, needs to do for others, because it is healing.
I want to hear it step by step, but I may be jumping. But
no problem.
One of the things that occurred to me when I read a little bit about your story was, sometimes people have very wonderful ideas and bureaucrats get in their way. And I wondered how, whatever authorities in Rwanda you had to deal with, how they reacted to the fact that here's this Jewish woman from the United States, originally from South Africa, who has an idea of how she is going to help 1 million kids in Rwanda. Not that there isn't something laudable about that, but sometimes the indigenous reaction is, what the heck are you doing here? And get out of my life. And so I was wondering whether, when you approached Rwanda, you were received well, or was it a battle?
We were received very well, but I have to say that I was also very strategic in how I did things. We went for that initial visit just to really talk to people who are on the ground working with orphans to get a sense of...
Who did you meet with?
We met with really anybody that would meet with us. So there are a whole bunch of not-for-profits, NGOs, local and international. We met with USAID. We met with...
Do you remember arriving in Rwanda for the very first time?
Yeah, so I had actually sent an advance team, which was Tina and another young Judean. But, really where the work was done was, we got an initial sense that, yes, this is a country that needs us, wants us, and it's going to work. But then the work was really not bringing an Israeli youth village to Rwanda, but figuring out what a Rwandan youth village was going to look like.
Very good.
So, we, one of the first things I did when I came back from that trip to Israel was hire a Rwandan to work with me. I had met through work on the Save Darfur campaign, I had met this incredible Rwandan woman who was living in Boston. She moved to South Africa about 2.5 years into the project, and unfortunately was recently killed in a car accident.
I'm sorry.
But she and I were, two peas in a pod. She was the Rwandan version of me,
right.
Totally. And so we really, it was Sifa, Tina, and myself who were really the advance team for all of this. We went to Rwanda the summer of 2006. We brought some Ethiopian Israelis to help us tell the story. But really what we did, we came back September of 2006. It was, Sifa, myself, and I sitting around my kitchen table saying, okay, we got people who really want a project. We got a model to follow. Now what do we do? Do we form our own NGO? How do we go about fundraising? Do we, create a 501c3, international, local, And so I had actually been working with the JDC. It was at the time of the tsunami. And so I went to my JDC friends and said, I have this project. It would be really great if we could house it somewhere. Can you help us figure out where to house it? And Will Recant, who's just a wonderful guy at the JDC, said, let me think about it, I'll get back to you. And a week later, he came back to me and he said, Steve Schweik was in the head of the JDC. He said, Steve says we can house it here. And so we became a special project of the JDC. We were our own little organization within the organization. And then a couple years into the project, we broke away. But going back to sort of the timeline and how we went about doing it, so September of 2006, we're in New York. We're now a special project of the JDC. So we get to at least go out and raise money for the project. Because again, and I just want to be clear, the JDC did not fund the village in any way, but they housed us. They gave us their fiscal oversight and allowed us to go out and raise money. So absolutely phenomenal what they did for us. But we, that's September 2006 until January 2007. I remember going to my husband in September of 2006 and saying, you know, I'm going to have to hire somebody to just do this because I'm going to have to, in order to make this happen, I'm going to have to go to Israel for 10 days, go to Rwanda for 10 days, go to, and at the time I had a child going into middle school, a child going into high school.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
And a child who was going into 11th grade, which as you know is like the big college year.
Yes.
So, and he took me aside and he said, if you're going to do it, you have to do it. It's not going to happen if you don't do it. And so I spent from September 2006 to January 2007, Sifa and I went to Israel for 10 days. We went to Rwanda, we came home for 10 days. We had this, she also had 2 young kids, even younger than mine. And so we went to Israel for 10 days, home for 10 days, Rwanda for 10 days, home for 10 days, and that was our life for 6 months. During that time, we learned as much as you ever want to know about youth villages, and began creating the model that would be ours. We put together a team in Rwanda of really people that across the board dealt with issues of reconciliation, issues of education, issues of HIV/AIDS, because we also have kids affected by that population. As you probably know, rape was used as a method of genocide, and so there are many orphans today in Rwanda who are newly orphaned because their mothers were raped during the genocide and are still passing away from that. And so we put together this group of 12 people, took them to Israel. We did an in-depth study of Yamin Ord, which is a high school, a youth village high school, which is the model that we wanted. But we also looked at other youth villages, spoke to other people, did a lot of research, and really they helped us form what would work in Rwanda. You know, in Israel, the kids lived in dormitories. Well, in Rwanda, we lived 16 kids in a house with a mom and a big brother or a big sister who's a Rwandan college graduate. So the model is different. The philosophy and the methodology is the same. You know, the language is a little different. We made it a little simpler. It can be a little complicated in translation, but it is, at its essence, it is the Yamin Ord-based youth village philosophy that has been transported and translated so that it works in Rwanda.
That's amazing. And no one in Rwanda gave you grief? There was no obstacle?
We purchased our land. When you go into, as people who do development work in Africa probably know, in many places of the world, you can have the government expropriate land for you. They're very happy for a socially good, worth anything that's going to be good for the country. They're happy to assist in that way. We wound up purchasing the land from the people in the area that we're in. That I think inured to our benefit in many different ways. We only hired locally, so we have a Rwandan architect, Rwandan contractors. Those people have been incredible friends to us as the project has progressed, and in fact, a couple of them sit on our board today. We hired only Rwandans. You know, the training comes from the outside, and this makes our project, unfortunately, quite expensive, but also is the reason that it is successful and that it will be successful and sustainable. So, you know, we have a village, we have 130 employees in the village. It's a village that's on 57 hectares. It's about 144 acres. We have a farm, we have cows, we have chickens. We grow about 35% of our food.
How many kids?
We have 500 kids. We've graduated 125. Our first class has graduated.
It's run as a school?
It is run as a village. So the kids, there's an area of the village where the kids live. They live in homes with their mom. And the big brother or big sister also lives in the village, as do, we have a health and wellness department, we have nurses, we have a social worker for every grade. You know, this is a level of care that is, you know, you sort of get from people in the donor world where I try and raise the funds for the village. You get, is that all that necessary? Yes, it's necessary. You know, it's sort of the notion that these kids are any less deserving than the kids who live down the block or the kid. And what's more important is the notion that these kids are any less capable. You know, we had, out of our graduating class, and these are kids that come from nowhere and nothing, out of our graduating class, all but one, and she could barely read and write when she came to us, and this is just high school, they've been with us for 4 years, all but one passed the national examinations in Rwanda. Every single one of them, except for the one, will get some kind of scholarship to continue their education. 9 of them applied outside, just on their own, we don't have a program, we're new, we're only around 4 years. 4 of them got full ride scholarships to McGill University.
Really?
You know, these kids, you know what, the next cure for cancer, for, you name it, it's gonna come out of these kids in Africa. They are smart and they are capable, and it is worth our while investing in them on so many levels.
Okay. I asked you a question as an aside. I still want to hear the answer. What was it like to go to Rwanda for yourself?
It was an interesting experience for me. You know, now I was with Ethiopian Israelis, Rwandans, you know, on my team, myself and Tina, and I remember sort of this notion of being the other, and not that there was any negative connotation with it, but it was really, you know, the Mzunga means, you know, stranger, white, but it's what the kids, when they see a white person, they'll run inside of your car going, Mzunga, Mzunga. You know, and it just, when you're sitting in a meeting, and our meetings were in French, Kinyarwanda, Hebrew, English, and it didn't matter, you know, the translation didn't interfere. It was about what was being said, what was the content. And that's really how I felt being in Rwanda, is that it was really the content. I remember at one point thinking to myself, and it must have been when I was looking for land, because I was the only white person, you know, with my whole team, but all Rwandans. And I remember thinking, you know, it took me about 2 hours of being engaged in all the stuff to sort of think about, it's, oh, God, you know, it's like I'm the white person here. This, you know, so I guess what the feeling was is I feel, and I felt, and I feel still being in Rwanda, part of humanity. You know, somebody said to me once, how do you identify? Do you consider yourself as someone in Rwanda? Do you consider yourself South African, Jewish, Israeli, white? Like, how do you identify? And they were joking, Rwandan, because for some people I'm like an honorary Rwandan citizen. And I really, truly, honestly feel like a citizen of the world. You know, and that's been a gift to me. And I think it's a gift to my kids. My kids feel part of a bigger thing than just themselves.
It sounds thrilling to me. Incidentally, not only were you a Mzunga, you were a Jewish Mzunga. Did they know you were a Jew? Does that ever play into this?
They did, and it's been, you know, we talked about the ripple effects of acting Jewishly in your philanthropy, and I will tell you that this is the classic case. You know, I went to Rwanda. They did not have a lot of experience with Jews. Now, I will say Rwanda, probably more than most places, there's at least a significant percentage of the population can identify with Jews because they're aware of the Holocaust. They know they went through a genocide. And they look to Israel as saying, you know, as a new country, Rwanda considers itself having been born after the genocide. They look to Israel and say, okay, you did it. We want to do it too. Let us see how you're doing it. And I will tell you that Rwandans are very eager to do things on their own. They're like, don't give us a handout. Show us how to do it. And that's really what they're looking for, and it's the way it should be. And so, you know, our very first visit to Rwanda, the person that we met was then mayor of Kigali. He became the governor of the district that we ultimately wound up being in. And I remember, and he then became Minister of Education. I remember going to seeing him when he was Minister of Education, and I was having an issue with teacher training, and you know, this, believe me, you don't want to know all the issues. But I went to see him, and I said, I need somebody to talk to about whatever the problem was. And he said, I'll bring somebody in. So he called someone into the office, and he says, and he introduced her, and he said, this is Ann Heyman, she's a Jew. And then he went on with the conversation. And that she's a Jew was meant to convey all the positive things. You know, where does that happen, right? And for him, being a Jew meant that you said you were going to do something, you did it with integrity, you did it, and that to him was what being a Jew meant. I will tell you that, you know, through him and through others, we're not political in any way, shape, or form, not with Israel, not with America, not with Rwanda. But I deal with, obviously, the ministries that I have to deal with. I have children that belong to Rwanda. So there's the Ministry of Youth, there's the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, et cetera, et cetera. But through those relationships, we got to know the ambassador for the United Nations, who now, when he came to New York, we introduced him to the Jewish community. We had a meet and greet. We were, as much assistance as we could provide. Not that he needed us for a whole lot, but we formed a strong bond of friendship. And today that Rwandan ambassador is the head of the Security Council. He's, it's a rotating presidentship.
Wow.
So Rwanda sits on the Security Council, and, the relationship between Rwanda and Israel is phenomenal. Could it, would it, should have been that way without us? Maybe. But I can tell you that it's that way because of us, and I don't have a doubt for a minute. I will tell you the other thing is that it has opened up platforms for, Israel there's a conversation that's going on in Israel about how they need to create other markets. Israel can't be reliant on the European Union. It cannot be reliant only on America. And the developing world is a tremendous market for Israel. And Israel has, again, tremendous lessons learned, tremendous experience, and tremendous products that they can bring to that world. For us, building this village, one of the biggest, and what keeps me up at night now, is the financial sustainability of the village. And particularly over the last few years, this year is particularly hard. We are struggling as a philanthropy. And the reality is that I don't know that we can ever not need donor dollars, but for the most part, we need to figure out a model that does not rely on donor dollars. And the way to do that is to create businesses that are integral to the village. It's a win-win for everybody because you have these smart, bright kids that are being educated in a new and different and creative way, and they can be the workforce for the business. And you have a lot of Israeli businessmen that are looking to get involved in business in Africa. So I am very thrilled to let you know that, and please God, that the agreement will be signed next week. We are partners with an Israeli solar company, Arava Power. Their Africa arm is Energia, and we are going to open the first solar farm in sub-Saharan Africa.
Amazing.
So, this is the model. It will take a while for, the financial piece to catch up. So we still need those dollar donors. But this is the first of probably 2 or 3 or maybe 4 businesses, so that ultimately our kids are trained in many different things, and the village is sustainable. It's good for the business people. It's good for Israel. It's good for us. It's just good for everybody.
First of all, it's breathtaking the way you describe it. It's just fabulous. You said there are 500 kids there. Mm-hmm. I would imagine every young person in Rwanda, any orphan as it's defined by the United Nations, everyone wants to be there. How do you handle the problem that I can just imagine just a flood of people wanting to come to your youth village?
We actually don't have an application process. What we do is we write a letter to the 30 districts. There are 30 districts in Rwanda, so the mayor of each district saying, can you identify 10 orphans in your district that meet, we're doing another intake, that meet our criteria. And our criteria are all based on vulnerability. We'll pare that down to 180, and then those 180 kids get home visits to make sure that they actually are who they say they are and they come where they say they come from. I will tell you, those home visits are heartbreaking, and the most difficult thing that our staff does, we usually divide into teams of 3. Thank God it's all, like I said, my staff is all Rwandan. The Rwandans do it. But, there are still places in Rwanda where you drive your car to the point where you have to walk, and you have to walk 4 hours up a hill to find the hut that the kid lives in. And what the most amazing thing is, and you'll see when you come to the village, those kids, they come to us a little bit with like deer in the headlights, but within 3 months, within a week, they're holding hands with their new brothers and sisters, and but the hope that literally pulsates in the village. I once had a visitor say to me, I now know what hope feels like. And it truly is that way. And, for these kids, it is life-changing just in so many different ways. But I think that's the hardest part, is that I get to read a document that tells me about their stories. And that is heart-wrenching. To have to choose, like you said, there's more than 10. Even when you have 10, you got to pare it down to 4. It's tough.
Yes, it is.
It's tough.
Did I see you almost tear up?
Yes, because I
Does this
always do.
make-
And I will tell you something, my kids in the village, my biological kids and my kids in the village all make fun of me because I talk, part of the way that I raise money for the village is I go on the speaker circuit and I talk to groups of people and I've been doing this for 7 years, for God's sake, and I still will tear up because these kids are inspirational. They truly are.
You tear for a good reason.
It's funny, we say, Agahozo means a place where tears are dried.
Yes.
And the kids always say, a place where people come to cry. But they're good tears. They're tears of joy.
They are. They are. You're a wonderful person. I would imagine you are a very important person to them, too. You symbolize something.
They call me grandma.
Do they? Do you love it? Do you love it?
Well, kind of loving being a grandma, but...
You know what they mean.
But I do know what they mean. It is...
It's a very wonderful compliment to you.
And the biggest compliment to me is that those kids, part of our program is Tikkun Olam. The kids have to go out into the community and do community service. And they do, my kids growing up in the Upper West Side of Manhattan did Tikkun Olam. They, with Dorot, visited old people. I'm not knocking it in any way, shape, or form. But these kids are going out. They're building houses for people that don't have houses. They're growing food for people that don't have food. They're teaching computers and English and just extraordinary things. And that commitment to give back, that's what I appreciate about these kids, is that they will tell me how much they love me and appreciate what I've done for them and how they're going to do it for others. It is always part of the same thing. So, you talked about if you save a life,
Yeah.
That's what it means. It's that every one of these kids is going to touch the lives of hundreds of other people. It is literally, this village is changing the lives of thousands of people every day.
It's been an honor to speak to you. You are doing extraordinary work. You are doing God's work. You're doing the most Jewish work of all. I love the fact that for you it comes out of a Jewish commitment, that somehow all you've learned, whether it was in South Africa with your family, whether it was in young Judea, whether it was in Israel, as you and your husband get to know each other, and then as you create a world together with him and 3 children, and then you've chosen this, and you've chosen to give of yourself. And you have touched people, and you have made a difference. And I hope the people who listen to this, most people watching us right now, they're never in a position that you were in. But there are small ways that people can do exactly the same type of thing in their own world, in their own community, in their own family. And so it's my hope that in some way, and it's why I really wanted you so badly here, I wanted them to hear this story because we are all inspired by what you do. And you deserve an enormous amount of credit. Before we close, I need you to tell our audience, if anybody wants to be involved in what you're doing, how do they go about that?
There are many ways that you can volunteer. I think the best way is to go to our website, and there's a volunteer page. It's www.asyv.org. Certainly you can also donate through the website. And I am more than happy for anyone to reach out to me. I'm Ann@asyv.org, Ann with an E.
By the way, you also have a very special event coming up on May 6th. Tell us about it.
Yes, we do. So our event on May 6th is our annual fundraiser. We call it Stand Up and Be Counted. And this is really the opportunity for anybody who wants to stand up and make a voice, have a voice to join us. We actually bring in some kids from the village who put on a show. We have tremendous entertainment. Betty Wright and Cuba Gooding will be the entertainment for the evening. But really, the kids are the reason to come. We're also honoring the Liquidate Family, which is a corporate social responsibility program that has just done wonders for the village, which you'll learn about, but also giving an award to Yossi Abramowitz, who is one of the founders of the solar company.
Wow.
So if you want to come and learn and see
Where will
about
it
the
be?
impact, it will be at Tribeca 360, which is in New York City. But you can get information on the website, www.asyv.org, and you can also purchase tickets through the website. If you want to see what this project is about, come and meet the kids, come and learn about the Israeli business ventures in Rwanda and the incredible relationship that has been built around this village, and come and learn why this work is good for the Jews.
That's lovely. I wish you kol tuv hatzlacha in all you do.
Thank you.
And you're very, very young. There's a lot left for you to do.
Thank you.
But what you've done is extraordinary, and you speak and do on behalf of the entire Jewish world. And it's been an honor meeting you. I thank you very, very much.
Thank you for having me.
The thoughts of Ann Heyman, founder of the Agahozo-Shalom Youth Village in Rwanda. An extraordinary story, and as you can see, an extraordinary human being. Of course, as always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to Ann's story. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, tweet me. I look forward to hearing from you. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'chaim, my friends, through life.
We would be pleased to send a complimentary DVD of this program to anyone who wishes to support Shalom TV with a tax-deductible gift of $36, double chai or more, to the nonprofit organization Jewish Education in Media. Simply visit the Shalom TV website homepage and click on the Donate button to make a donation by PayPal or your credit card. And please indicate the program for which you would like a DVD. Or you can send your tax-deductible check made out to GEM, Post Office Box 180, Riverdale Station, Bronx, New York, 10471. And again, please remember to indicate which program you would like to receive on DVD with our compliments. And we thank you for your kind support.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish Education in Media.